Welcome to Stoic Vivu, your trusted companion for transforming ancient Stoic wisdom into practical tools for modern life. Here, we believe that the greatest philosophers who ever lived, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, left us a blueprint for mental strength, emotional resilience, and unshakable peace of mind. Our mission is simple: take their timeless teachings and show you exactly how to apply them to the challenges you face every single day. How much longer are you going to wait to demand the best of yourself? We all know we have untapped potential. We all recognize habits we need to stop and behaviors we should start. Yet we keep telling ourselves we'll change tomorrow, next week, or next year. But will we really? At the end of every year, people reflect on what went wrong and dream about how the next year will be different. What they're really talking about is habits, the small daily actions that either build us up or tear us down. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus captured the entire philosophy of Stoicism in just two powerful words: persist and resist. There are things we must keep doing and things we must stop doing. Your mind is the battlefield where your future gets decided. Every thought you allow to linger, every reaction you choose in moments of stress, every small decision about how you spend your time, these shape who you become. The Stoics understood that true transformation doesn't happen through massive overhauls or dramatic life changes. It happens through daily practices that gradually rewire your brain and strengthen your character. Think about your current mental state. How often does anxiety hijack your thoughts? When was the last time you felt completely in control of your emotions? Do you wake up energized and purposeful? Or do you immediately reach for your phone and get pulled into other people's agendas? The way you think and react has become a habit, and like any habit, it can be changed. The 9 daily habits we're about to explore aren't just lifestyle tips or productivity hacks. They're mental training exercises developed by some of history's most resilient minds. Marcus Aurelius used these principles while leading the Roman Empire through plague and war. Seneca applied them while navigating the dangerous politics of ancient Rome. Epictetus taught them after experiencing slavery and physical disability. These aren't theories from ivory tower philosophers. These are battle-tested strategies for mental transformation from people who faced real adversity and emerged stronger. Today, you're going to discover how to apply their wisdom to your modern challenges. Whether you're dealing with workplace stress, relationship conflicts, financial pressure, or simply the overwhelming pace of contemporary life, your mind transformation journey begins with a single choice: the decision to take control of your thoughts instead of letting them control you. Let's dive into the first habit that will start rewiring your brain for strength, clarity, and unshakable peace. 1. Start small to win big. The power of tiny daily changes. Consider this. Sarah, a marketing executive in Manhattan, stares at her overflowing bookshelf every morning while rushing to catch the subway. For 3 years, she's promised herself she'll read more, learn more, and become the knowledgeable person she admires in others. Every January, she sets the same ambitious goal: read 50 books this year. By March, she's read half of one book and feels like a failure. Sound familiar? Sarah's mistake isn't a lack of willpower or intelligence. She's fallen into the trap that destroys more dreams than any external obstacle: thinking too big, too fast. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience now confirms: lasting transformation happens through the accumulation of tiny, consistent actions, not dramatic overhauls. George Washington, America's first president, had a favorite saying that guided him through the Revolutionary War and the founding of a nation. Many mickles make a muckle. This Scottish proverb means that small things add up to create something substantial. Washington understood that winning independence wouldn't happen through one decisive battle, but through countless small victories, strategic retreats, and daily acts of persistence. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, taught his students that well-being is realized by small steps, but it is no small thing. Think about that profound truth. The destination, a transformed mind, unshakable peace, emotional mastery, is monumental. But the path there consists of steps so small they seem almost insignificant in the moment. Here's what Sarah discovered when she finally applied this ancient wisdom to her modern life. Instead of promising to read 50 books, she committed to reading just one page every morning before checking her phone. One page, that's roughly 2 minutes. Even on her most chaotic days, rushing to catch the 7:15 train, she could manage one page. What happened next reveals the genius of thinking small. Within a week, one page felt easy, almost automatic. By week 3, she often found herself reading 3 or 4 pages because she was engaged in the story. 6 months later, she had finished 12 books, not 50, but infinitely more than the 0 she'd achieved with her previous approach. The principle behind Sarah's success is what modern researchers call atomic habits, changes so small they seem like they shouldn't matter, but they compound into remarkable results. An atom is the smallest possible building block of matter. When we think about transforming our minds, we need to identify the atomic components of that transformation. Let's visit Chicago, where David, a financial analyst, struggled with anger management. His temper would explode during stressful work calls, damaging his reputation and relationships. Traditional anger management advice told him to count to 10, take deep breaths, or remove himself from triggering situations. These techniques require significant willpower in heated moments, exactly when willpower is least available. Instead, David applied the Stoic principle of starting small. Every morning, he practiced one tiny mental exercise. Before getting out of bed, he would remind himself that his emotional reactions were his choice. Not his boss's choice, not his client's choice, not traffic's choice, his choice. This took 30 seconds. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in his personal journal, "Today I escaped anxiety. Actually, no, I discarded it because it was within me." David started each day by mentally claiming ownership of his emotional responses. This microscopic habit created a foundation for larger changes. Within weeks, David noticed something remarkable. During stressful moments, he would hear a quiet inner voice reminding him that his reaction was his choice. He wasn't counting to 10 or using complex breathing techniques. He was simply remembering a truth he'd reinforced 30 seconds every morning for weeks. The neuroscience behind this transformation is fascinating. Every time we repeat a thought or behavior, we strengthen the neural pathways associated with that action. Think of it like walking through a field. The first time, you have to push through tall grass and create a path. The 10th time, there's a faint trail. The 100th time, there's a clear walkway. The 1000th time, there's a permanent path that requires no conscious effort to follow. When David spent 30 seconds each morning claiming ownership of his emotions, he was literally rewiring his brain. He was creating a neural superhighway that would automatically activate during stress, reminding him of his power to choose his response. This is why the Stoics emphasized daily practice over dramatic gestures. Seneca, the Roman statesman and philosopher, wrote extensively about the power of consistent small actions. He understood that character isn't built in moments of crisis. It's built in the quiet, unremarkable moments when no one is watching. Take Emma, a teacher in Seattle, who wanted to develop a meditation practice. Traditional advice suggested starting with 20-minute sessions, but Emma couldn't find 20 uninterrupted minutes in her day with 2 young children and a demanding job. Instead, she started with 3 conscious breaths while her coffee brewed each morning. 3 breaths, 30 seconds. Those 3 breaths became an anchor point in her chaotic day. After 2 weeks, she naturally began taking conscious breaths at other moments, while waiting at red lights, before entering challenging meetings, after difficult conversations with students. She never formally increased her meditation time, but mindfulness began weaving itself throughout her day. This is the magic of starting small. The habit grows organically because it becomes part of your identity rather than something you force yourself to do. Emma didn't see herself as someone trying to meditate. She became someone who breathes consciously. Sarah didn't try to become a reader. She became someone who learns something new each morning. Ultimately, the transformation of your mind begins with honoring the profound truth that small things compound into extraordinary results. When you start small enough that success feels inevitable, you build momentum that carries you far beyond what you initially thought possible. This wisdom leads us to examine something even more fundamental than our actions, our relationship with anxiety and worry, which often prevents us from taking even the smallest steps forward. 2. Stop letting anxiety control your mind. Marcus Aurelius method. Imagine this. Michael sits in his car outside Chicago's O'Hare Airport, gripping the steering wheel as his heart pounds. His flight to the most important business presentation of his career leaves in 2 hours. But he's paralyzed by a mental storm. What if the plane crashes? What if he forgets his presentation? What if his laptop dies? What if the client hates his proposal? The anxiety spirals deeper, consuming his energy and clouding his judgment exactly when he needs clarity most. This scene plays out millions of times daily across America, in boardrooms before big meetings, in bedrooms before first dates, in parking lots before job interviews. We've been taught that anxiety is something that happens to us, an unavoidable response to stressful situations. The ancient Stoics knew better. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire during plague, war, and constant political threats, discovered something revolutionary about anxiety that modern neuroscience now confirms. In his personal journal, later published as Meditations, he wrote, "Today I escaped anxiety. Actually, no, that's not right. I discarded it because it was within me." Read that again. He didn't escape anxiety like it was an external force attacking him. He discarded it, recognizing that anxiety was something he was creating and therefore something he could control. This isn't positive thinking or wishful optimism. This is a fundamental truth about how anxiety actually works. Let's return to Michael at the airport. Traditional anxiety management tells him to use breathing techniques, distraction methods, or positive affirmations. These approaches treat anxiety like a fire to be extinguished rather than addressing why the fire started in the first place. Marcus Aurelius offers a more powerful approach. Recognize that you are the one holding the match. The plane isn't responsible for Michael's anxiety. The presentation isn't responsible. The client isn't responsible. Michael is creating his anxiety through the stories he's telling himself about future events that may never happen. The Stoics call this mental time travel, leaving the present moment to suffer in an imaginary future. Consider Lisa, a software engineer in Austin, who discovered this principle during her daily commute. Every morning, she would sit in traffic on Interstate 35, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios about her workday. Her boss might criticize her code. Her project might fail. She might get fired. By the time she reached the office, she was emotionally exhausted before her day even began. One morning, Lisa decided to test Marcus Aurelius' approach. Instead of fighting her anxious thoughts, she observed them with curiosity. She realized she was essentially writing horror stories about events that hadn't happened, then responding emotionally as if they were real. She was scaring herself with her own imagination. The next morning, when anxiety started its familiar spiral, Lisa asked herself a simple question Marcus Aurelius used. Is this thought about something happening right now? Or am I creating suffering about something that may never occur? The traffic was real. The slow-moving cars were real. But the catastrophic stories about her workday, those were mental fiction. This recognition didn't immediately eliminate her anxiety, but it created a crucial space between the trigger and her response. She began to see anxiety not as an external enemy, but as a signal that her mind was creating unnecessary suffering. Instead of being controlled by anxiety, she became its observer. Marcus Aurelius faced situations that would terrify most of us: barbarian invasions, political assassinations, deadly plagues sweeping through his empire. Yet his journal reveals a man who understood that external events, no matter how challenging, couldn't create his emotional state without his participation. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Take James, a restaurant manager in Denver, who applied this wisdom during the chaos of the pandemic. When lockdown orders threatened his business, his initial response was pure panic. He catastrophized about bankruptcy, unemployment, losing his home. The anxiety was so intense that he couldn't sleep or make clear decisions about how to adapt his business. Then James remembered Marcus Aurelius' teaching about the dichotomy of control, the fundamental Stoic principle that some things are within our control and others are not. The government's decisions were outside his control. The virus was outside his control. Customer behavior was outside his control. But his response to these circumstances, that was entirely within his control. James began asking himself, what can I actually control right now? He could control his business plan. He could control his communication with employees. He could control his efforts to pivot to delivery services. Instead of wasting mental energy on uncontrollable factors, he channeled it into areas where his actions could make a difference. This shift from anxiety to action happened because James stopped trying to control external events and started taking responsibility for his internal response. The situation didn't become less challenging, but his relationship with the challenge transformed completely. The neuroscience behind this transformation is remarkable. When we recognize anxiety as self-created rather than externally imposed, we activate the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation. This literally changes our brain chemistry, reducing stress hormones and increasing our capacity for clear decision-making. Marcus Aurelius' method isn't about suppressing anxiety or pretending difficult situations aren't challenging. It's about recognizing the difference between legitimate concerns that require action and mental torture that serves no purpose. When Michael finally grasped this distinction, he could prepare for his presentation without creating additional suffering through worry. The Emperor's approach requires radical honesty about our role in creating our own misery. We must acknowledge that we are not victims of our circumstances, but active participants in our emotional experience. This responsibility might seem burdensome, but it's actually liberating. If you're creating your anxiety, you have the power to stop creating it. Essentially, transforming your relationship with anxiety means understanding that your mind is not a helpless victim of external events, but a powerful tool you can learn to direct. With this foundation of mental ownership established, we can now explore how to structure your days in ways that support rather than undermine your mental strength. 3. Build a morning routine that rewires your brain. Visualize this. Rebecca rolls out of bed in her Brooklyn apartment at 6:47 a.m., already 13 minutes behind schedule. She grabs her phone while stumbling toward the coffee maker, immediately bombarded by 17 work emails, 3 urgent text messages, and a flood of news notifications about political scandals, natural disasters, and economic uncertainty. Before she's even fully awake, her mind is scattered across a dozen different concerns, none of which she can address effectively in her pajamas. This chaotic morning scene repeats in millions of American homes daily. We wake up and immediately surrender control of our mental state to other people's agendas, emergency-driven thinking, and reactive responses to whatever crisis demands our attention. The ancient Stoics understood something profound that modern neuroscience confirms. How you start your day literally rewires your brain for everything that follows. Seneca, the Roman philosopher and advisor to emperors, wrote, "Life without design is erratic. As soon as one lays down principles, the things that follow become clear." He understood that principles aren't abstract philosophical concepts. They're practical frameworks that guide daily actions, especially in those crucial first moments when your mind is most malleable. The morning hours offer a unique neurological opportunity. Your brain emerges from sleep in what scientists call a hypnagogic state, highly receptive to forming new neural pathways and reinforcing existing patterns. Whatever thoughts, emotions, and behaviors you engage in during this window become deeply embedded in your subconscious programming. Most people accidentally program themselves for chaos, reactivity, and external control. Consider Marcus, a financial advisor in Seattle, who discovered the transformative power of intentional morning design. For years, he started each day by checking market futures on his phone before getting out of bed. If the markets were down, his mood plummeted. If they were volatile, his anxiety spiked. He was allowing external financial forces to determine his emotional state before he'd even had breakfast. Marcus decided to implement what the Stoics called morning reflection, a practice of setting his mental framework before engaging with the external world. Instead of reaching for his phone, he spent the first 5 minutes of consciousness asking himself 3 questions. What can I control today? What character traits do I want to strengthen? And how can I serve others while staying true to my principles? This simple shift created a cascade of positive changes. By establishing his internal priorities before external demands could hijack his attention, Marcus found himself making clearer decisions throughout the day. Client meetings felt less stressful because he'd already centered himself on what truly mattered. Market volatility still affected his work, but it no longer determined his emotional state. The neuroscience behind Marcus's transformation reveals why morning routines are so powerful. During the first hour after waking, your brain produces higher levels of cortisol, not the harmful stress hormone most people imagine, but a natural alertness chemical that enhances focus and learning. When you combine this heightened neuroplasticity with intentional practices, you literally sculpt your brain's default patterns. Let's examine Jennifer, a marketing executive in Phoenix, who created a morning routine that transformed her relationship with stress. Her previous mornings involved hitting the snooze button 3 times, rushing through getting ready, and arriving at work already feeling behind and overwhelmed. She decided to wake up just 30 minutes earlier to claim what she called her sovereignty hour. Jennifer's routine wasn't elaborate or time-consuming. She began with 2 minutes of conscious breathing, not meditation, just intentional awareness of her breath to activate her parasympathetic nervous system. Then she spent 5 minutes writing 3 things she was grateful for, training her brain to notice abundance rather than scarcity. Finally, she identified her most important task for the day, ensuring her energy would go toward meaningful work rather than busy work. The results were remarkable. Within 3 weeks, Jennifer noticed she felt calmer during crisis situations at work. She stopped reaching for her phone during stressful moments and instead took conscious breaths. Her ability to prioritize improved dramatically because she'd practiced identifying what truly mattered each morning. She wasn't just starting her days differently. She was rewiring her brain's default responses to stress and uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius, who managed the Roman Empire while maintaining inner peace, understood that morning practices aren't luxuries for people with abundant free time. They're essential tools for anyone who wants to maintain mental clarity under pressure. In his journal, he wrote detailed morning reflections, reminding himself of Stoic principles before facing the day's challenges. One crucial element of effective morning routines is what modern productivity experts call creative protection time. This means tackling your most important work before external demands can fragment your attention. Take David, a graphic designer in Nashville, who discovered that his creative energy was highest in the first 2 hours after waking. Instead of checking emails or social media, David began using this prime mental real estate for his most meaningful design projects. He found that work which previously took him 4 distracted hours could be completed in 90 focused minutes. More importantly, starting his day with purposeful creation rather than reactive consumption fundamentally shifted his sense of personal agency and professional satisfaction. The Stoic approach to morning routines isn't about rigid schedules or complex rituals. It's about intentionally choosing how you want to program your mind rather than letting external forces make that choice for you. Seneca practiced this by writing letters to his friend Lucilius each morning, clarifying his thoughts and reinforcing his philosophical principles before engaging with the political chaos of ancient Rome. Here's the practical framework that integrates ancient Stoic wisdom with modern neuroscience. Wake up 15 to 30 minutes earlier than necessary. Avoid screens for the first hour. Engage in one activity that reinforces your values, whether that's reading philosophy, writing gratitudes, planning your priorities, or simply thinking clearly about who you want to be that day. The goal isn't perfection or elaborate self-care routines. The goal is to claim ownership of your mental state before external circumstances can hijack it. When you start each day by strengthening the neural pathways associated with clarity, purpose, and conscious choice, you build resilience that carries you through whatever challenges arise. Therefore, the foundation of mental transformation lies not in dramatic life changes, but in how consistently you claim sovereignty over those precious first moments of consciousness. This daily practice of mental ownership prepares you to tackle the deeper challenge of breaking habits that no longer serve your highest good. 4. Break any bad habit that's hijacking your thoughts. Here's the scenario. Angela sits at her desk in downtown Los Angeles, supposedly working on an important quarterly report. Instead, she finds herself mindlessly scrolling through social media for the third time in an hour. Her thumb moves automatically, refresh, scroll. Compare her life to carefully curated highlight reels of people she barely knows. 2 hours vanish. The report remains unfinished. She feels disgusted with herself but can't seem to stop. Angela isn't weak or lacking willpower. She's caught in the grip of a mental habit that has hijacked her brain's reward system. Like millions of Americans, she's discovered that breaking bad habits requires more than good intentions or temporary motivation. It requires understanding how habits control our thoughts and learning the ancient Stoic method for reclaiming mental freedom. The most powerful example of habit mastery comes from one of America's greatest leaders. Dwight Eisenhower smoked 4 packs of cigarettes daily for 40 years. When his doctor warned that this habit would kill him and prevent him from serving his country, Eisenhower made a decision that reveals the true nature of personal freedom. He said simply, "I gave myself an order and I stopped." He quit cold turkey after 4 decades of addiction. This wasn't superhuman willpower. This was the application of a profound Stoic principle that Epictetus taught his students. No one is free who is not master of himself. Eisenhower understood that every moment he reached for a cigarette, he was choosing slavery over sovereignty, automatic response over conscious choice. The neuroscience behind Eisenhower's transformation illuminates why most habit-breaking attempts fail. Bad habits create neural superhighways in our brains, automatic patterns that bypass conscious decision-making. When Angela reaches for her phone, she's not making a deliberate choice to waste time. She's following a neural pathway carved by thousands of previous repetitions. Traditional habit-breaking advice focuses on external strategies. Remove triggers, replace bad habits with good ones, use accountability partners. These approaches miss the deeper issue that the Stoics understood. The real battle isn't with the habit itself, it's with the part of your mind that has surrendered control to automatic responses. Consider James, a software engineer in Austin, who realized his evening news consumption was destroying his mental peace. He would spend hours scrolling through increasingly alarming headlines, feeding his brain a steady diet of outrage, fear, and helplessness. He wasn't staying informed, he was training his mind to see the world as a threatening place where he had no power to create positive change. James tried the usual approaches. He deleted news apps from his phone, but found himself checking news websites on his laptop. He set time limits, but consistently ignored them when big stories broke. He asked his girlfriend to hold him accountable, but grew resentful when she reminded him of his commitment. The external strategies failed because they didn't address the internal surrender of control. Then James discovered the Stoic approach to habit mastery. Instead of fighting the habit directly, he began examining the moment of choice that preceded each episode of news consumption. He realized there was always a split second, sometimes barely conscious, when he decided to reach for his phone or open a news website. Seneca wrote extensively about this crucial moment of choice. He understood that habits feel automatic, but they actually consist of thousands of tiny decisions we make so quickly we don't notice them. The key to breaking bad habits isn't eliminating the trigger or changing the environment. It's becoming conscious of the moment when you choose to follow the habitual pattern. James began practicing what he called the pause. Whenever he felt the urge to check news, instead of automatically following the impulse, he would stop and ask himself, am I choosing to consume this information because it will help me take meaningful action? Or am I feeding my brain anxiety because I'm avoiding something more important? This simple question transformed his relationship with news consumption. He discovered that most of his news reading was actually procrastination, a way to avoid tackling challenging work projects or personal conversations. The news itself wasn't the problem. The habit of using information consumption to escape present-moment responsibility was hijacking his mental clarity. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was profound. James realized he had been unconsciously choosing to feel powerless by focusing on events he couldn't control instead of investing his mental energy in areas where he could make a difference. Breaking the news addiction habit freed up mental space for creative projects, meaningful relationships, and personal growth. Let's examine Sarah, a teacher in Minneapolis, who applied this principle to her social media comparison habit. She found herself spending hours on Instagram, comparing her real life to other people's curated presentations, feeling increasingly inadequate about her career, relationships, and lifestyle choices. Sarah's breakthrough came when she started observing the emotional state that preceded her social media binges. She noticed she typically reached for her phone when feeling uncertain about her life choices or lonely after difficult days at school. The habit wasn't really about social media. It was about seeking external validation to avoid internal discomfort. Using the Stoic principle of self-examination, Sarah began asking herself, what am I actually seeking right now? Connection, distraction, or validation? This question helped her recognize that she was using social media as emotional anesthesia rather than genuine connection. She began calling friends when she felt lonely, working on personal projects when she felt uncertain, and practicing gratitude when she felt inadequate. The ancient Stoics understood something modern psychology is rediscovering. Bad habits are often symptoms of deeper needs that aren't being met consciously. When we address the underlying need through conscious choice rather than automatic reaction, the habit naturally loses its power over us. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being." He understood that every moment offers a choice between automatic response and conscious action, between slavery to habit and the exercise of human freedom. Ultimately, breaking bad habits isn't about perfection or never experiencing urges again. It's about reclaiming the moment of choice that exists between trigger and response. When you consistently choose conscious action over automatic reaction, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with self-mastery and weaken the ones associated with mental slavery. In essence, true freedom comes not from the absence of challenging urges, but from the presence of conscious choice in how you respond to them. This foundation of mental sovereignty prepares you to tackle an even more fundamental challenge: eliminating the mental clutter that crowds out clarity and peace. 5. Free your mind by eliminating mental clutter. Set the scene. Patricia sits in her corner office in downtown Boston, staring at her computer screen with 43 browser tabs open. Her phone buzzes with notifications from 6 different apps. Her email inbox shows 1,247 unread messages. 3 podcasts are queued up for her commute. She's subscribed to 12 news outlets, 8 business newsletters, and countless social media feeds, promising to keep her informed and ahead of the curve. Patricia feels like she's drowning in information while starving for wisdom. She knows more about celebrity divorces than her own life goals, more about political scandals than her personal values, and more about market fluctuations than what truly brings her peace. She's addicted to staying informed, but feels increasingly confused about what actually matters. This is the modern epidemic of mental clutter, the overconsumption of information that crowds out clear thinking and genuine insight. We mistake being busy with being productive, staying informed with being wise, consuming content with creating meaning. The ancient Stoics understood something that our hyperconnected age desperately needs to rediscover. Epictetus taught his students a radical principle: if you wish to improve, be willing to not know about some things. This wasn't anti-intellectual advice from a philosopher who valued ignorance. Epictetus was teaching selective attention, the crucial skill of choosing what deserves your mental energy and what doesn't. Consider the mental real estate in your brain as prime property. Every piece of information you consume, every news story you read, every social media post you engage with is taking up valuable space that could be used for creative thinking, problem solving, relationship building, or personal growth. Most people are mental hoarders, cramming their consciousness with information they'll never use while leaving no room for the insights that could transform their lives. Take Michael, a marketing director in Denver, who discovered this principle during a particularly overwhelming week. He was juggling 3 major campaigns, monitoring industry trends across multiple platforms, staying current with political developments, following his favorite sports teams, and trying to keep up with friends' social media updates. His mind felt like a browser with too many tabs open, everything running slowly, nothing working efficiently. Michael decided to experiment with what he called an information diet. For 1 week, he would only consume information that directly related to his current projects or personal relationships. No random news articles, no social media browsing, no industry newsletters unless they addressed specific challenges he was facing. The results surprised him. Within 3 days, Michael noticed his mind felt quieter, less scattered. He could focus for longer periods without the mental itch to check for updates. More importantly, he began having original thoughts again, creative solutions to work problems, insights about his relationships, ideas for personal projects he'd been too mentally cluttered to pursue. The neuroscience behind Michael's experience reveals why mental decluttering is so powerful. Information overload creates a state of continuous partial attention, a condition where your brain is constantly switching between inputs without fully processing any of them. This fragmented thinking patterns weakens your ability to engage in deep thought, creative problem solving, and meaningful reflection. Seneca, who managed vast business interests while maintaining philosophical clarity, wrote about this challenge. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor. He understood that mental poverty comes not from lacking information, but from the insatiable hunger for more input that prevents us from fully digesting what we already know. Let's examine Lisa, an attorney in Portland, who applied this wisdom to her news consumption habits. She realized she was spending 2 hours daily reading about political developments, economic forecasts, and global crises, events she could observe but not influence. This information diet was making her feel informed but powerless, aware but anxious. Lisa implemented what she called purposeful ignorance. She stopped following daily political news and instead read one comprehensive weekly summary. She unsubscribed from economic newsletters that made her worry about market crashes she couldn't prevent. She limited global news to events that directly affected her community or offered opportunities for meaningful action. This wasn't burying her head in the sand, it was strategic attention management. Lisa discovered that staying informed about everything meant being able to act effectively on nothing. By dramatically reducing her information input, she freed up mental energy for areas where she could make a genuine difference. Her legal cases, her family relationships, her community involvement. The transformation went beyond improved focus. Lisa began experiencing what psychologists call flow states, periods of deep engagement where time seemed to disappear and her best work emerged naturally. These states are impossible when your mind is constantly switching between different information streams and processing irrelevant inputs. Marcus Aurelius, who had access to information from across the Roman Empire, practiced selective attention as a survival skill. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not because the future didn't matter, but because most information about distant events was either irrelevant to his actual decisions or impossible to act upon meaningfully." The practical application of mental decluttering requires honest self-examination about your information consumption habits. Check your screen time settings and identify how many hours you spend consuming versus creating. Notice how much of your daily mental energy goes toward processing information you can't act upon versus addressing challenges you can actually solve. Consider implementing what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, training yourself to want less rather than trying to get more. This applies perfectly to information consumption. Instead of trying to stay current with every news source, industry trend, and social media update, choose 3 information sources that genuinely serve your goals and personal growth. The goal isn't ignorance, it's intentional awareness. When you eliminate mental clutter, you create space for the kind of deep thinking that leads to breakthrough insights, creative solutions, and genuine wisdom. You trade the illusion of being informed about everything for the reality of understanding what matters most. Amanda, a graphic designer in Nashville, discovered this when she eliminated her social media accounts and stopped following design trend websites obsessively. Instead of constantly consuming other people's creative work, she began developing her own distinctive style. Her best work emerged not from staying current with trends, but from having the mental space to explore her own creative vision. Consequently, mental decluttering isn't about limiting yourself. It's about freeing yourself from the tyranny of irrelevant information so you can focus on what truly deserves your precious mental energy. This practice of selective attention creates the foundation for an even more challenging but transformative habit that builds genuine mental toughness. 6. The 5-minute mental toughness challenge that changes everything. Suppose this: Jake stands outside his Phoenix apartment at 5:30 a.m., staring at the cold shower he's about to take. Every instinct in his body screams against this decision. The warm bed he just left feels infinitely more appealing than the shocking blast of cold water waiting for him. His mind generates a dozen rational excuses. It's unnecessary, it's uncomfortable, he could get sick, nobody else does this, he should just go back to bed. This moment, standing at the threshold between comfort and voluntary discomfort, reveals the battleground where mental toughness is either built or abandoned. Jake isn't preparing for some extreme athletic competition or survival situation. He's practicing an ancient Stoic technique that transforms ordinary people into mentally unshakable individuals. Seneca, one of Rome's most influential philosophers, had a tradition that reveals the power of voluntary discomfort. Every January 1st, he would throw himself into the freezing Tiber River that flows through Rome. This wasn't masochism or showing off, it was a deliberate practice of what the Stoics called preferred indifference. Seneca was training his mind to remain calm and decisive regardless of external circumstances. When Seneca plunged into that icy water, he was sending a message to his subconscious mind. I am in control. I am so completely in charge of my responses that I will voluntarily choose discomfort to strengthen my mental resilience. This practice prepared him to maintain clarity during political crises, business disasters, and personal tragedies that would overwhelm most people. The neuroscience behind voluntary discomfort reveals why this practice is so transformative. When you voluntarily expose yourself to controlled stress, whether cold water, physical exercise, or uncomfortable conversations, you strengthen your prefrontal cortex's ability to override your amygdala's panic responses. You're literally training your brain to stay rational when primitive survival instincts want to take control. Jake discovered this principle during a particularly challenging period in his career as a financial advisor. Market volatility was triggering anxiety attacks that clouded his judgment exactly when clients needed his clearest thinking. Traditional stress management techniques helped temporarily, but he needed something more fundamental, a way to build resilience before stress arrived rather than managing it after it overwhelmed him. He started with 2 minutes of cold water at the end of his regular shower. The initial shock was intense, but Jake noticed something remarkable. The mental skills required to stay calm in cold water, controlled breathing, present moment focus, acceptance of discomfort, were identical to the skills needed during market crashes and client panic. Within weeks, Jake found himself remaining unusually calm during stressful work situations. When clients called in panic about portfolio losses, he could listen thoughtfully instead of absorbing their anxiety. When unexpected problems arose, he approached them with curious problem-solving energy rather than reactive stress. This transformation happened because Jake was training what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to remain functional and clear-thinking when circumstances become uncomfortable. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding discomfort, which means they never develop the mental muscles needed to handle life's inevitable challenges. Consider Maria, a teacher in Seattle who applied this principle to a completely different challenge. She was terrified of difficult conversations, whether addressing behavioral problems with students, requesting resources from administrators, or discussing relationship issues with her partner. Her avoidance of short-term discomfort was creating long-term suffering in every area of her life. Maria began practicing voluntary social discomfort. She started small, asking for directions when she already knew the way, making eye contact with strangers, initiating conversations with cashiers. These tiny acts of voluntary awkwardness built her tolerance for the discomfort that accompanies honest communication. The results were profound. Within a month, Maria found herself addressing classroom management issues directly instead of hoping they would resolve themselves. She scheduled the difficult conversation with her administrator about the lack of supplies. She initiated the relationship discussion she'd been avoiding for months. The key insight Maria discovered is that discomfort is like a muscle. It grows stronger with regular, progressive training. By voluntarily choosing small discomforts, she built the capacity to handle larger challenges with grace and clarity. Marcus Aurelius, who faced military campaigns, political betrayals, and family tragedies, understood this principle deeply. He wrote, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this something that's up to me or not?" When you practice voluntary discomfort, you're training yourself to focus on what you can control, your response, rather than what you can't control, the circumstances. Let's examine David, an entrepreneur in Atlanta, who used cold exposure to prepare for business challenges. Running a startup meant constant uncertainty, rejection from investors, and the stress of making decisions with incomplete information. David realized that his comfort-seeking habits were making him less resilient when business got difficult. He began taking cold showers and scheduling other forms of voluntary discomfort, difficult workout sessions, challenging conversations with employees, and public speaking opportunities that scared him. This wasn't about being tough for its own sake. It was about building the mental flexibility to remain clear and decisive when external pressures increased. The practice transformed David's relationship with business stress. Investor rejections stopped feeling personal because he trained his mind to separate external outcomes from internal worth. Difficult business decisions became opportunities to practice wisdom rather than sources of overwhelming anxiety. The beauty of voluntary discomfort is its simplicity and scalability. You don't need special equipment, expensive programs, or dramatic lifestyle changes. You need the willingness to choose short-term discomfort for long-term strength. Start with cold water, 30 seconds at the end of your shower. Notice the mental chatter that arises and practice staying calm despite the discomfort. Gradually increase the duration as your tolerance builds. The goal isn't to suffer unnecessarily, but to expand your capacity to remain centered when life becomes challenging. Other forms of voluntary discomfort include exercising when you don't feel like it, having conversations you've been avoiding, sitting in silence without entertainment, choosing the harder but more meaningful path in daily decisions. Epictetus, who experienced slavery and physical disability, taught that freedom comes not from controlling external circumstances, but from choosing your response to whatever circumstances arise. Voluntary discomfort trains this fundamental skill, the ability to choose your response rather than being controlled by automatic reactions to discomfort. In essence, mental toughness isn't about being unfeeling or emotionally detached. It's about maintaining your capacity for wise action even when circumstances become uncomfortable. This daily practice of voluntary challenge builds the foundation for surrounding yourself with influences that elevate rather than diminish your mental strength. 7. Surround yourself with people who upgrade your mindset. Allow me to set the scene. Rachel sits in a Dallas coffee shop with her college friends, listening to the same conversation she's heard countless times over the past 5 years. Jennifer complains about her demanding boss while refusing to look for better opportunities. Mark rants about political developments while admitting he never votes or volunteers. Susan gossips about mutual friends' relationship problems while avoiding addressing issues in her own marriage. Rachel realizes with growing discomfort that these monthly gatherings drain her energy rather than energize her. She leaves feeling cynical, pessimistic, and focused on problems rather than solutions. Her friends aren't bad people, but their mental habits, complaining without action, criticizing without contributing, consuming drama without creating value, are gradually reshaping her own thought patterns. This scenario reveals one of the most underestimated forces shaping your mental transformation: the people you choose to spend time with regularly. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern neuroscience confirms. Human beings are unconsciously influenced by the thoughts, emotions, and behaviors of those around them through a process called emotional contagion. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful person in the Roman Empire, was incredibly intentional about his associations. He surrounded himself with philosophical advisors, ethical teachers, and people who challenged him to be better rather than those who merely agreed with him or enabled his worst impulses. He understood that leadership required constant learning, and learning required the right teachers. The principle behind Rachel's dilemma was captured perfectly by an old expression the Stoics knew well: "If you dwell with a lame man, you will learn how to limp." This isn't cruel judgment about physical disabilities. It's recognition that we unconsciously adopt the mental and emotional patterns of people we spend significant time with. Consider Tom, a software engineer in Portland, who discovered this principle when he realized his work team was gradually eroding his optimism and problem-solving mindset. His colleagues had developed a culture of learned helplessness. Every new project was met with complaints about impossible deadlines, inadequate resources, and management incompetence. Their default response to challenges was criticism rather than creativity. Tom noticed he was beginning to adopt their mental patterns. He started dreading new assignments instead of seeing them as growth opportunities. He found himself joining complaint sessions instead of proposing solutions. His natural innovation mindset was being replaced by a victim mentality that blamed external circumstances for every difficulty. The transformation happened gradually, which made it particularly dangerous. Tom didn't wake up one day and decide to become negative. He was slowly infected by the mental habits of people who had given up agency over their professional lives. This is how association influences work. They're subtle, persistent, and often unconscious. Tom decided to implement what the Stoics called selective association. He began spending lunch breaks with colleagues from other departments who approached work challenges with curiosity and solution-focused thinking. He joined a professional development group where people shared learning experiences rather than grievances. He limited his exposure to complaint-centered conversations while increasing time with people who embodied the mindset he wanted to develop. The results were remarkable. Within a month, Tom found his natural optimism and problem-solving energy returning. New projects felt exciting again rather than burdensome. He started proposing innovative solutions instead of adding to the chorus of complaints. His career trajectory changed as managers noticed his positive leadership during challenging situations. Seneca understood this principle deeply through his friendship with Lucilius, documented in his famous letters. Seneca wrote, "We learn as we teach." Their correspondence reveals two intelligent people challenging each other's thinking, sharing insights, and holding each other accountable for living according to their philosophical principles. This mutual elevation through association is what the Stoics called philosophical friendship. Let's examine Lisa, a marketing director in Minneapolis, who applied this wisdom to her personal relationships. She realized her social circle consisted primarily of people who bonded through shared complaints about work, relationships, politics, and life in general. While these connections felt supportive in the moment, they reinforced mental patterns focused on problems rather than solutions, grievances rather than gratitude. Lisa began intentionally cultivating friendships with people who embodied qualities she wanted to strengthen in herself. Curiosity instead of cynicism, action orientation instead of complaint-focused thinking, personal responsibility instead of victim mentality. She joined book clubs focused on personal development, volunteer organizations aligned with her values, and professional groups centered on learning and growth. This shift didn't mean abandoning old friends who were genuinely supportive, but it did mean spending less time in environments that reinforced mental patterns she wanted to change. Lisa discovered that when she surrounded herself with people who approached life challenges with resilience and creativity, she naturally began adopting those same mental strategies. The neuroscience behind association influence reveals why this practice is so powerful. Mirror neurons in our brains automatically fire when we observe others' behaviors and emotions, creating unconscious imitation of the mental patterns we're regularly exposed to. This means you literally become more like the people you spend the most time with, whether you intend to or not. Epictetus, who taught students from across the Roman Empire, created what historians call the Cynic Circle, a community of philosophers who gathered regularly to discuss ideas, challenge each other's thinking, and support each other's growth. They understood that wisdom develops through a relationship with others who are committed to similar values and goals. The practical application of this principle requires an honest assessment of your current associations. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? What mental patterns do they consistently reinforce? Do they approach challenges with curiosity or complaint? Do they take responsibility for their circumstances or blame external factors? Do they inspire you to grow or enable you to stay comfortable? Creating an environment that supports your mental transformation doesn't mean becoming elitist or abandoning people who care about you. It means being intentional about the mental influences you expose yourself to regularly. You can maintain caring relationships with people whose mindsets don't align with your growth goals, while also cultivating connections with those who challenge you to become better. Amy, a teacher in Nashville, found a creative solution by starting a weekly discussion group focused on applying ancient philosophy to modern challenges. She invited friends who were interested in personal growth to explore Stoic principles together. This created a supportive community centered on the mental patterns she wanted to strengthen while maintaining existing relationships. Clearly, then, the people you surround yourself with either accelerate or hinder your mental transformation through the unconscious influence of their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Building this foundation of supportive associations prepares you to embrace the next crucial element of mental growth: developing a healthy relationship with change and uncertainty. 8. Rewire your brain to see change as your greatest advantage. Let us imagine for a moment. Kevin receives an email that changes everything. His company is restructuring, his department is being eliminated, and his comfortable routine of the past 8 years is ending in 30 days. His first reaction is pure panic: mortgage payments, health insurance, career uncertainty, starting over at 42. He spends 3 sleepless nights catastrophizing about everything that could go wrong, feeling like a victim of circumstances beyond his control. This scene plays out thousands of times daily across America. Unexpected changes trigger our brain's threat detection system, flooding us with stress hormones and worst-case scenario thinking. We resist change because our evolutionary programming treats uncertainty as danger. The ancient Stoics understood something revolutionary that modern neuroscience confirms. The same change that terrifies most people can become your greatest source of growth, opportunity, and personal power. Marcus Aurelius, who managed the Roman Empire through wars, plagues, and constant political upheaval, wrote one of the most profound insights about change ever recorded. Everything in life comes from change, good and bad. The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. He understood that fighting change is like fighting the nature of existence itself, exhausting, futile, and guaranteed to create suffering. The key insight Marcus Aurelius discovered is that change itself is neutral. It's neither inherently good nor bad. What determines whether change benefits or harms you is entirely dependent on how you choose to think about it and respond to it. This isn't positive thinking or denial of real challenges. It's recognition that your mental framework determines your experience of external events. Let's return to Kevin's situation and examine how a Stoic approach transforms his experience. Instead of focusing on everything he's losing, Kevin began asking different questions. What skills have I developed that are more valuable now than 8 years ago? What opportunities might exist that weren't available when I was comfortable in my routine? How can I use this disruption to create something better than what I had? This shift in questioning represents what the Stoics called the discipline of perception, training yourself to see situations from multiple angles rather than accepting your initial emotional reaction as the only reality. Kevin realized that his job elimination was forcing him to develop skills he'd been procrastinating on for years. Networking, updating his professional portfolio, exploring new industries, and clarifying his actual career goals rather than just maintaining the status quo. The neuroscience behind this mental transformation reveals why perception shifts are so powerful. When you reframe change from a threat to an opportunity, you activate different neural networks in your brain. Instead of engaging the amygdala's fight or flight response, you activate the prefrontal cortex's problem-solving and planning functions. This literally changes your brain chemistry from stress hormones that cloud thinking to neurotransmitters that enhance creativity and learning. Consider Maria, a restaurant manager in Houston, who faced this principle during the pandemic. When lockdown orders forced her restaurant to close dining rooms, her initial response was despair. 20 years of industry experience seemed worthless when the entire business model collapsed overnight. She could have focused on the injustice, the uncertainty, the financial stress, all legitimate concerns that consumed many of her colleagues. Instead, Maria applied Marcus Aurelius' teaching about change being the source of both good and bad. She asked herself, what if this disruption is forcing innovations that will make us stronger in the long term? This question led her to explore delivery systems, online ordering platforms, and community engagement strategies she never would have considered during normal operations. The results exceeded her expectations. The changes forced by external circumstances revealed new revenue streams, stronger customer relationships, and operational efficiencies that improved the business even after dining rooms reopened. Maria's willingness to see change as an opportunity rather than an obstacle positioned her restaurant to thrive while competitors struggled. This transformation required what the Stoics called preferred indifference, recognizing that external circumstances are less important than your response to them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This doesn't mean external events don't matter, but that your mental response determines whether those events become sources of growth or sources of suffering. Let's examine James, a software engineer in San Francisco, who discovered this principle when artificial intelligence began automating parts of his job. His initial reaction was anxiety about obsolescence and resentment toward technological progress. He could have spent his energy fighting changes he couldn't control or complaining about the unfairness of rapid technological advancement. Instead, James chose to see AI as a collaborator rather than competitor. He began learning how to integrate AI tools into his workflow, exploring how technology could handle routine tasks while he focused on creative problem-solving and strategic thinking. This perspective shift positioned him as an early adopter and expert in human-AI collaboration, making him more valuable rather than obsolete. The Stoic approach to change requires releasing attachment to how things should be and embracing curiosity about how things actually are. Seneca wrote extensively about this principle. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. He understood that resistance to change creates suffering because it fights against the fundamental nature of reality. Take Sarah, a teacher in Denver, who applied this wisdom when education moved online during the pandemic. Instead of mourning the loss of traditional classroom teaching, she became curious about digital learning possibilities. She developed skills in virtual engagement, online curriculum design, and technology integration that enhanced her teaching effectiveness even after returning to physical classrooms. The practical application of this principle starts with changing your internal language about change. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "How can this situation help me grow?" Instead of thinking, "This disrupts my plans," think, "This reveals new possibilities I hadn't considered." Instead of focusing on what I'm losing, explore what I might gain. Marcus Aurelius practiced this reframing daily through his personal journal entries. When faced with difficult changes, he would write about them from multiple perspectives, looking for hidden opportunities and lessons. This wasn't a denial of challenges, but intellectual honesty about the complex nature of change. The goal isn't to welcome every change enthusiastically, but to approach change with curiosity rather than automatic resistance. When you train your brain to see change as information rather than a threat, you unlock mental flexibility that transforms obstacles into advantages. Thus, rewiring your brain to embrace change means recognizing that the only constant in life is change itself, and your ability to adapt and grow through change is your greatest competitive advantage in an uncertain world. This foundation of change adaptability prepares you for the final crucial skill, learning to eliminate the non-essential so you can focus on what truly matters. 9. Transform your life with one simple word that stops overwhelm. Visualize this. Rebecca sits at her kitchen table in Minneapolis at 11 p.m., laptop open, surrounded by half-finished projects and mounting obligations. Her calendar shows back-to-back meetings tomorrow, 3 volunteer commitments this weekend, 2 family gatherings next week, and a work conference the following month. She agreed to mentor a junior colleague, joined the neighborhood book club, volunteered for the school fundraiser, and committed to helping her sister move apartments. Rebecca feels like she's drowning in her own generosity. Every individual commitment seemed reasonable when she said yes, but collectively they've created a life of constant rushing, surface-level engagement, and chronic exhaustion. She can't remember the last time she felt truly present during any activity because her mind is always racing to the next obligation. This scenario reveals the hidden cost of an inability to say no. Not just busy schedules or time management problems, but the gradual erosion of meaning, depth, and authentic engagement with life. The ancient Stoics understood something that our opportunity-rich culture desperately needs to learn. The word no is not a limitation, but liberation. Marcus Aurelius, who received countless requests for his time, attention, and resources as Roman emperor, wrote, "Most of what we do is not essential. When we eliminate the inessential, we gain a double benefit. We do less, but we also do the essential things better." This insight reveals the mathematical reality of attention. Every yes to something non-essential is an automatic no to something that could be essential. The revolutionary power of no lies not in rejection, but in protection, protecting your mental energy, your relationships, your creative capacity, and your ability to show up fully for what matters most. When Rebecca examines her overwhelming schedule through this lens, she realizes that her inability to say no is actually preventing her from being excellent at anything. Consider David, a marketing executive in Nashville, who discovered this principle during a particularly overwhelming period. He was juggling 12 different projects simultaneously, attending every networking event in the city, and accepting every social invitation to avoid disappointing people. His productivity plummeted because he was switching between contexts constantly. His relationships suffered because he was physically present but mentally scattered. His health declined because he had no time for exercise, proper meals, or adequate sleep. David's breakthrough came when he started asking a simple question before accepting any new commitment. If I say yes to this, what am I automatically saying no to? This question revealed the hidden costs of his people-pleasing habits. Saying yes to another networking event meant saying no to time with his family. Accepting another project meant saying no to doing excellent work on existing commitments. Agreeing to social obligations meant saying no to the personal projects that energized him. The Stoic principle behind David's transformation is what philosophers call opportunity cost, the recognition that resources are finite and choosing one option necessarily excludes others. When you say yes to everything, you're actually choosing to do nothing well rather than choosing to do important things excellently. Marcus Aurelius practiced this discipline rigorously. Historical records show he regularly declined invitations, delegated responsibilities, and eliminated activities that didn't align with his core duties as emperor and philosopher. This wasn't selfishness or antisocial behavior. It was strategic focus that enabled him to fulfill his essential roles at the highest level. Let's examine Lisa, a teacher in Portland, who applied this wisdom to her volunteer commitments. She had gradually accumulated obligations on 5 different committees, 3 charitable organizations, and 2 professional development groups. Each commitment seemed worthy, but collectively, they were preventing her from excelling in her primary role as an educator. Lisa implemented what she called essential filtering. She identified her 3 most important life roles: being an excellent teacher, a present mother, and a continuous learner. Any commitment that didn't directly support one of these roles became a candidate for elimination. This wasn't about becoming selfish, but about becoming intentional. The process required difficult conversations and temporary disappointment from others, but the results were transformative. Lisa's teaching improved dramatically because she had the mental energy to develop an innovative curriculum rather than just managing overwhelming obligations. Her relationship with her children deepened because she was present during their time together rather than mentally planning her next commitment. Her personal learning accelerated because she had time to engage deeply with subjects that fascinated her. The neuroscience behind strategic no reveals why this practice is so powerful for mental transformation. Decision fatigue, the mental exhaustion that comes from making too many choices, actually depletes the same mental resources needed for creativity, problem solving, and emotional regulation. When you eliminate non-essential decisions through principled no responses, you preserve mental energy for your most important work. Take Michael, a software developer in Chicago, who discovered this during a period when he was saying yes to every side project, consulting opportunity, and professional development course available. His coding quality suffered because he was context switching constantly. His learning plateaued because he was consuming information superficially rather than developing deep expertise. His creativity disappeared because he had no mental space for exploration and experimentation. Michael began practicing what he called ruthless prioritization. He identified his one primary professional goal, becoming an expert in machine learning, and said no to every opportunity that didn't directly advance this objective. Within 6 months, his expertise and professional reputation in his chosen field exceeded what he had accomplished in years of scattered learning. The practical application of this principle requires honest assessment of your current commitments and clear identification of your essential priorities. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor." This applies perfectly to time and attention. Poverty comes not from having too few opportunities, but from the inability to choose among abundant options. The word no becomes easier when you remember that you're not rejecting opportunities. You're protecting something more valuable. When Rebecca finally started declining non-essential commitments, she wasn't limiting her life. She was creating space for depth, excellence, and authentic engagement with what mattered most. The goal isn't to become antisocial or avoid all challenges, but to distinguish between opportunities that align with your values and goals versus those that simply fill time or satisfy other people's expectations. Every master craftsperson understands this principle. Excellence requires focus, and focus requires the courage to say no to good things so you can say yes to great things. Epictetus taught his students, "Wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants." This wisdom applies equally to commitments, opportunities, and obligations. True wealth of experience comes not from cramming your schedule with activities, but from engaging deeply with carefully chosen priorities. To sum up, the simple word no is actually the most powerful tool for creating a life of meaning, depth, and authentic achievement by protecting your most precious resources, time, attention, and mental energy, for what truly deserves them. This practice of intentional focus provides the foundation for resilience when inevitable setbacks and challenges test your commitment to these essential priorities. Your mental transformation journey starts today. The ancient Stoics knew something that modern life often makes us forget. Transformation doesn't happen through dramatic overhauls or perfect execution. It happens through the daily choice to persist when circumstances challenge you and resist when old patterns try to reclaim control. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful person in his world, wrote honestly about his own struggles with these habits. He fell short of his ideals, just as you will. He got distracted by non-essentials, just as you will. He sometimes let anxiety cloud his judgment, just as you will. But he also wrote these words in his personal journal. The key is to pick yourself back up when you fall and celebrate the fact that you're human. What mattered to Marcus Aurelius and what matters for you is not perfection but persistence. Not flawless execution, but the willingness to return to these practices when life knocks you off course. He understood that we will be jarred by circumstances, disrupted by unexpected challenges, and tempted to abandon our progress for the familiar comfort of old habits. The 9 habits you've explored today represent more than lifestyle changes or productivity tips. They're the mental training exercises that transform ordinary people into individuals who remain calm during chaos, clear during confusion, and purposeful during uncertainty. Each habit builds upon the others, creating a foundation of mental strength that nothing external can shake. Starting small builds the momentum that carries you through larger challenges. Taking responsibility for anxiety liberates you from victim thinking. Building intentional routines creates stability in an unstable world. Breaking bad habits restores your personal freedom. Eliminating mental clutter creates space for wisdom. Embracing voluntary discomfort builds unshakable resilience. Choosing your associations shapes your character. Welcoming change unlocks endless opportunities. Saying no to the inessential protects what matters most. These aren't theoretical concepts to admire from a distance. They're practical tools designed for real people facing real challenges in the modern world. The software engineer is struggling with anxiety. The teacher is overwhelmed by competing demands. The entrepreneur is facing constant uncertainty. The parent is trying to balance career and family. Every person seeking to transform their mind and reclaim control of their inner life. The beauty of Stoic philosophy lies in its immediate applicability. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions, extensive preparation, or life-changing events. You can begin transforming your mind right now, today, with the next choice you make. Pick one habit that resonates most strongly with your current challenges. Not 3 habits, not all 9, just one. Commit to practicing it for the next 7 days with the same dedication Marcus Aurelius brought to leading an empire. Notice how that single practice begins to influence other areas of your thinking and behavior. Remember that you're joining a tradition spanning over 2,000 years of people who chose to take responsibility for their mental state rather than remaining victims of circumstance. From ancient Rome to modern America, these principles have guided individuals through wars, economic collapses, personal tragedies, and every form of human challenge. Your mental transformation journey starts with today's choices. Make them count. If this content has provided value for your life, please subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel for weekly doses of ancient wisdom applied to modern challenges. Hit the like button to help others discover these life-changing principles, and share this video with someone who could benefit from developing unshakable mental strength. Your engagement helps us continue creating content that transforms lives through timeless Stoic wisdom. The path to mental transformation awaits. Take the first step today.